Okay, I want to do something a little bit different for you for my summit talk this year. So I was thinking, what should I do that is going to make it stand out a little bit besides this yellow backdrop? Like, what can I do? How can I build something? How can I craft something, a talk, a presentation virtually that's going to be a little bit different? Something that's going to, fill my cup a little bit more than just sitting in front of Zoom the whole time or in front of a laptop and getting out the real camera and doing the real stuff. And I thought, what am I going to call this thing? And then it dawned on me. Check this out. So here I am inside my son's artillery room. We love the Nerf stuff. So here's what I've decided to do. In the spirit of this room and the name of this talk is I am going to give this entire presentation sitting here in my son's Nerf artillery room. And I'm sure you won't mind. It's going to be something different, something dynamic, something fun, something echoey, something dank, something cramped, something kind of uncomfortable. Okay, I tried. You know what? We're just going to go back to the usual way we do things. Slide deck, me in the corner, chatting with you about how to build bulletproof blocks of time. Here we go. What's that smell? Hope you enjoyed that little preamble there. It really did inspire the name of this presentation. My son and I were nerfing around, and I thought, what can I do that's a bit different? Hope you enjoyed that little intro. But let's get into the meat of this thing. Let's get started. Let's get right into it. So I want to talk to you about the two ways that there are that you can use to build bulletproof blocks of time. And if you follow my work for a while, you're definitely going to know one of them, but the other one is in the name of this summit. And the interesting thing about these two ways is that they are kind of cut from the same cloth. There's a nuance to them for sure. And that's something that I think is really, really important. When you're thinking about which one of these to adopt, I think that you've got to keep in mind that they are, while all, kind of the color blue, which you're seeing here, they do have their own nuance to them. And I think they both can play a really valuable role in building those bulletproof blocks of time. So the first one is, as I mentioned, the name. It's in the name of this summit. It's called time blocking. And, it's been popularized by a variety of different productivity experts and time management experts. I mean, there's a time block planner that Cal Newport put out, and, he mentioned it as the use case for deliberate practice. And it's a big, big deal. And I think it's a really valuable tool. I don't use it as much as others, and we're going to get to that in a second. I want to show you what time blocking to me, how it looks. So this is an example of a calendar setup. So I haven't got dates or times on here, but if you were to look at a calendar from this long view, you would see these blocks of time. Notice how they are varying sizes. They are on different times of days. They are spread out over the course of the week. There's a lot of dynamic elements to these blocks of time. And that's what I envision time blocking to be. That's how I kind of establish my idea and my thoughts around time blocking and having blocks of time in your schedule. The feature set of time blocking really boils down to these three things. Number one, they are periods of time set aside for laser focus. So when I'm creating a time block, and when you create a time block as well, I think it's really critical that you get laser focused with these blocks of time, because you don't have some of the other elements that, one of the other ways has necessarily. You don't have that that consistency. You don't have those streaks. We're going to get to that in a minute here. But you really want to name these with something that is going to create a catalyst for action. You also need to know that these blocks of time can be dynamically inserted into your calendar, and that's a real benefit. There's a lot of people who can't foresee what their schedule is going to look like, week over week over week. They either have a job that is very static, 9 to 5. There's meetings that are inside of it, so it's very hard for them to know when they can work on certain things and when they can block out certain times of their schedule. They may not have as much command over their calendar as they would like to think. I believe that there are ways to create that, and we're going to get to that as we go through this presentation here. But the great thing about using time blocks is you can actually insert them throughout the week. So if you were to plan next week, say this coming Friday, you could insert time blocks in the following week wherever you've got available space. You could insert one here, one there. You could maybe insert multiple ones at different times. Whereas you can't really do that with the other element, the other way that we're going to talk about here. So it does allow a lot of dynamic activity to take place, and it's very good for people who have ever-changing schedules. So if you have a schedule that is not really static, or you're at the mercy of other people, maybe you've given them your calendar link and they can book whatever they choose, you really may have to rely on this element of blocking your time, the act of time blocking, than the other one that we're going to get to in a minute. And I know I keep teasing that, but we are going to get to it. And the reason that I wanted to focus on this one first is because I think it's one that people can grasp a lot easier. It's something that they feel that they can do with limited damage to, let's say, their relationships that they may have with colleagues and such. By blocking out time weeks and weeks in advance, that can create some challenges for some. So time blocking, the fact that you can do this on a week-by-week basis, is a really powerful thing. And once you build that practice in, if you set aside time to say, where can I block off time for these laser-focused types of activities, you're going to be in a much better place. So here's an example of time blocking. And you can see here that our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is setting aside time to read. And interestingly, it's about making decisions. So I think that that's really interesting, considering that you're going to have to decide what you would put inside these blocks of time. Now, reading or researching, you may not necessarily be able to set up a streak or a consistent schedule with this. You're going to have to find those pockets of time. And really, you don't find them, you make them. So you're going to have to take your schedule and then decide, okay, I'm going to put this period of time, this block of time is going to be dedicated to reading and research on this week, but the following week it's going to be at this time. So this would be an example. And I think the other thing you need to keep in mind is that he's reading a very specific book here. So that would be another thing you'd want to look at, is I'm going to read this book. For example, I would use this in my own schedule for reading, let's say, the guest's book of a podcast guest. So the book that's coming out for, say, Cal Newport, or for Michael Hyatt, or Seth Godin. I'm not necessarily going to have a block of time consistently every single day of the week or something like that. Instead, I'm going to have these blocks where I'm going to say, I need to set aside time to read Cal's new book, or read Keith Ferrazzi's new book, or read Laura Vanderkam's new book. So you want to make this laser focused. You want to make this as precise as you can, because the limits of the time that you have available are very narrow, and you want to make sure that your focus is narrow as well. So that's the way I would, and the way I highly recommend with all my clients and in my work, that people use time blocking, is for laser focused specific tasks or specific projects, this laser focus that you want to have over these shorter and often varying blocks of time. Here's an example. So you can see now I've got these filled out with very specific activities inside of them. The Sunday, I'm focusing on this challenge. On Monday, I'm using this in personal life as well. So if you don't know when you can fit yoga into your schedule, that would be where you'd want to put it. And you'd want to say yoga. You wouldn't want to say exercise necessarily, or you wouldn't want to say, fitness. It should be a very specific thing for you to do. And because it's a short window of time, that's even more important. Email time. See, this is where you're focusing not necessarily on one email, but you're focusing on one modality. I'm going into email, and this is when I'm going to work on email. And then on Friday, you could see Project X. So I'm going to give all of my attention and my focus to working on Project X. I've blocked out this time. That's what that is for. Let's move on to the second way, which is the one you may have heard me talk about before if you've been following my work, and that's time theming. And there is a difference between time blocking and time theming. This is what time theming looks like. You could see that there is a consistent streak that's been established Sunday through Wednesday, a short period of time, but it's a streak nonetheless. And you'll notice that it's at the same time of day as well. So it's not just the same amount of time, but it's the same time of day. And the same thing happens Wednesday through Friday. Now you'll notice that Saturday doesn't have anything on there. And that's the great thing about theming time. You don't necessarily need to have it go through all 7 days of the week or all, 2 days in a row here and then 3 days in a row there. You can streak it whichever way you want. And when I talk about theming your time, I don't just talk about horizontal theming, which is what the example you're seeing right now, which is times of day over a consistent period of time. Instead, there are others like daily theming, where you give your day a theme, and you can see that in this image right now, the Sunday theme, the Monday theme, Tuesday, all that stuff. Those are daily themes. There's also monthly themes. I'm not going to get into that in this presentation. I've got something I'll share with you a little bit later that may help you establish some of those. But that's the great thing about theming, is it covers a much wider swath than, say, time blocking does. You can use it for things like the entire day, or you can use it for an entire month. You can give an overarching focus to something for an entire week, or you could do it for a streak or a period of time horizontally, as you can see here with the example of horizontal theming. So, what is the feature set of time theming? Well, again, it is a period of time, but it's set aside for flexible focus. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that because you're establishing a streak, a consistent period of time over multiple days, right? In this case, which we're using horizontal theming, you have the flexibility of making your focus a little bit wider. So, for example, I wouldn't necessarily use it for focusing on Project X. Instead, I might say I'm going to work on a particular type of modality. I'm going to focus on writing, let's say. I'm not going to get as myopic or as narrow with my focus because, again, you're establishing this consistency. And when you do this, what's happening is you're wiring your brain to know what to do at a specific time of day or a specific day of the week or a specific month of the year. You're wiring your brain so that it knows what it needs to do to get going at that period of time. I'll give you an example in a little bit here. But again, another feature is that the blocks of times are consistent and they establish what I'm saying here are streaks. So as you saw, there are streaks here. Sunday through Wednesday, at that period of time, there is something happening there. And that consistency breeds productivity, right? It breeds the ability to make measured progress day over day, week over week, month over month. And you can see the same thing happening in the other example where the streak is 3. Now, again, the streaks don't have to be 4 days in a row, 3 days in a row. They can be, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's a streak, as long as it's week over week over week, right? It can also be Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Anything that's 2 or more consecutive days, as long as it gets ingrained. And I think that's the other thing too, is when you're establishing these themes of time, or this time theming element here, you need to make sure that you figure out not only what you need to put in there to give you that overarching focus, but also the cadence that's really going to work for you. If you were only going to do it on Mondays once per month, that is not a horizontal theme. That is not theming your time because the cadence is just not there. If you were to do it every 2 weeks, that's got an element of horizontal theming to it because it's every 2 weeks. It's actually kind of a hybrid to a degree of daily theming and horizontal theming. But if you find it's not working for you, then you either need to increase the cadence, which is something that you're seeing here, or you need to decide whether or not it needs to fit into a theme at all, or whether it should be a block of time, like a time block that doesn't need that consistency there. So that's important to note. And then finally, these are really ideal for people who want to create ongoing schedule boundaries. So again, back to this slide. For example, you cannot book time with me during those periods of time. They are consistent. They are week over week. You see this in my schedule. I see this in my schedule. And I know that no one can book time with me during that period of time. Whereas if you go back to the time blocking schedule here, and you see that there is this may not look the same week over week. So there's a lot more dynamic elements to it. You're not as concerned about the boundary building in your schedule because you may not be able to do it nearly as much as, say, someone like me or someone who's self-employed or someone who runs their own business. Whereas here, you could see that, right? You can see that there is a consistency here, which again creates the bandwidth, that clarity that allows me to focus on what needs to happen within those periods of time. So here's an example of time theming. I am really trying to get better at exercise. That's something that I really want to do. I've been wanting to do it for years. I'm not a fan of exercise. I grew up not exercising much at all. It was forced upon me. But as I'm getting older, I realize that I need to do it because if I don't do it, then, well, I'm going to break down and I'm not going to be able to keep up with my kids or, hopefully grandkids down the line. So I wanted to establish something that would work. I tried yoga, which you saw in earlier example. I tried DDP yoga. I'm a pro wrestling fan, so I even tried to, kind of bring in one of my own, interests into exercise to see if it would make a difference, and it didn't. I tried running. I've run a 10K. I finished the 10K. I was only competing against myself. It was fantastic. I don't want to do that consistently because my knees won't be able to take it. I also need to remove other elements of friction. Friction like putting on gym clothes. Friction like, what am I going to do about the work I need to do? Or socializing. I can't do that when I'm running. I can't do that when I'm lifting weights. I started to do some research. I took a step back. I slowed down and realized, okay, I need to stay fit. How am I not only going to do that? What will help me do that? But where can I put it in my schedule so that I can make that happen? And through my research, through stepping back and slowing down and really being thoughtful about this, and when you're theming your time, more so than when you're establishing blocks of time, you have to be more thoughtful because there's a permanence to it, right? You're going to try to create some sustainability. And if you want to create something that's sustainable, you need to be more thoughtful about it. You need to make sure that it can be sustainable. And so when I looked at, the idea of the way that, ikigai, which is like that Japanese term, which basically means that, there's an ease to life, and I mean, I'm probably butchering what it means right now, but I wanted that. I wanted to know that it was sustainable, that I would be able to just do it and with very little friction and basically stave off that primitive part of my brain that only wants to survive and allow the prefrontal cortex, that higher functioning part that wants to thrive, to really find its way forward. Give it all the ammunition it could use, pun totally intended, by the way, so that I could get walking done. And I found it. I realized that if I went for a walk for 1 hour in the morning, I would get in better shape. I'd be able to walk my way into better shape. It would go a long way. Eating and a bunch of other things would have to happen, but it was the exercise I could do. I could bring my phone with me, which means I could listen to podcasts. I could make phone calls. I could even dictate writing into the Drafts app that I have on my iPhone. So I removed every piece of friction. I wouldn't have to get dressed into anything more than what I'm wearing now. I wouldn't have to warm up. I could just get up and go. And that's what I decided to do. That's an example of time theming, is figuring out when you can do something that's sustainable and then you establish a consistent routine around it. Morning routines and evening routines are the same. I bet that if you look back at this right now, you're probably already doing some element of time theming. Morning routine, evening routine. Maybe you have a day that you or a time of day where you are focused on eating dinner, like 6 p.m. You sit down and eat dinner. That's a themed period of time. Sleeping. That's a themed period of time. Your overarching focus during that time period is sleep, is rest, is recharging. So this is what my identifiers, what my overarching focus shows up when you look at these, when you start to see the titles I added to it. And again, I don't have times here necessarily. Just want to illustrate this in a very simple fashion. So you could see Sunday through Wednesday, and that's not my actual time. It's Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday I don't have it happening. But this would be an example. 4 days a week, I'm walking in the morning. That could be an example that you use, right? I'm going to use that for that period of time. It's a short period of time. It's consistent. I know that I'm going to be walking. And then you could see the latter part of the day, there's a bit more of a time period there. That's making time. And again, there's some flexible focus in there, because making could be writing. It could be filming. It could be building a course. It could be working on things for a challenge. It could be making this very, very video that you're watching right now. I've got some flexibility there. Now, I have to caution you, with all of this stuff, you have to decide what's personally right for you. You know, what is your just right? I call this the Goldilocks factor, right? The idea of, when I'm looking at this and you see making time and walking time, if I had put yoga in there, that would be what I would call too hard, right? Because yoga is a very specific type of activity, and it would be too narrow of a focus for me to do. If I didn't do the yoga, then what would I do, right? What would I do? Well, there's really only one thing that I could do, and that's yoga. There's no fitness, there's no running, there's no walking, there's no nothing. It says yoga, and that for me was a barrier to entry. For me, it was a point of friction. So I call that too hard. You know, in the Goldilocks and the Three Bears story, if it's too narrow, if it's too tight of a window, if it's not flexible enough, it's too hard. Then there's too soft. So if I had put fitness in there, well, that's a very big overarching focus area. That means I could essentially not make any choices around what I'm going to do. I could say fitness. Well, does that mean walking? Does that mean running? Does that mean going and jumping on a trampoline? It's too soft. Making could be too soft. Maybe I need to know more if it's a filming, if it's a podcasting, if it's a writing. Maybe I need to narrow it down a bit. So that's too soft. There's the just right. That's the one you want. Walking time, just right. I know I need to walk, but there's enough flexibility within it that I can go wherever I want to walk. I could go walk to the beach. I could go walk around the neighborhood. And I also know that there's the flexibility to make phone calls and write and do all that stuff when I'm walking. Making time, that could be too soft if I'm not careful. That's why it's an ongoing evolutionary process. But for me right now, it's the just right. And you need to fine tune this. The difference between time blocking and time theming, another difference, is that time blocking, because it's dynamic and you're doing it more so, in my mind, on the fly, or with less boundary building, you don't need to necessarily audit it as ruthlessly as and keep your eye on it as much, because it will change basically week over week, month over month, etc., based on your needs. Because remember, you're laser focused on certain things, and some of those things will change over time, right? More radically than, say, when you're theming your time, because themes are a bit wider, they're more flexible. But within that flexibility, if you're not catching that you are not getting as much done in those periods of time, then you may need to narrow that field of focus a bit. You may need to take a look at that and figure out, hey, why is this my just right any longer? And again, journaling helps with this, and this is something that I'll talk about a little bit later when I share with you this challenge that I've been working on. So, which one should you use? Should you use time blocking? Should you use time theming? And I'm a big believer in taking taking the advice of Bruce Lee. You know, the adage of absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, and add your own. And I think that applies to a whole wide variety of things. Again, walking is my form of exercise. I'm going to have lots of people that say, Mike, you're not walking enough. Mike, you should be adding resistance training, all that stuff. But that's for me to decide. Making, again, that's my choice. It's a very personal choice how you approach this. So which should you use? I think you should use both. I think that in certain circumstances, time blocking, and you can see there's a slight difference in the shade of gray in this slide. Like one pencil is a little bit different than the other. And that's because depending on the situation, they are very close cousins. Time blocking and time theming are very close cousins, right? So in some instances, you may want to use time theming for your morning and evening routines. You may want to use it for things like walking, or you may want to use it for, let's say I want to make a period, I'm working on a book. I need to make a horizontal theme for that so that I can get the book done, right? But in other circumstances, you can say, you know what? I need to have some blocks of time set aside to work on this very specific thing that I need to get done. So I don't think it's one or the other. In fact, I know it's not one or the other. Whether you have a very dynamic schedule that changes week over week, or it's rather static and you have more command over it, both of these ways are bulletproof ways to build blocks of time, barriers for your time, boundaries for your time. They are both very valid and important tools that you can get in your toolkit and use as needed. And again, I don't recommend that you theme your entire day, hours of the day, that is, horizontally theme every moment of it. That's hyper scheduling, and hyper scheduling can be a whole other dangerous rabbit hole that we could go down, right? I also don't think that you should block out every element of your day, because I think that can also run the risk of overwhelm and overload, especially when you don't necessarily have control over what could come your way at any given moment. You need to give yourself some margin, some breathing room, some white space on your calendar. That's why this is called the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit. There's the task management part. That's going to fit in those blank areas where you may not be blocking out time or theming your time. So I think both are important. Just like I think using elements of different productivity systems can be really valuable. And I know in time crafting, I take pride in that. I take pride in the fact that the framework and approach that I've created allows for that ability to use things like the Pomodoro technique or the Eisenhower matrix or elements of getting things done, etc., etc. And time blocking, because time theming is for sure one of the core elements of time crafting. But using blocks of time, it's easily integrated into the time crafting framework. But here's the thing about both of these ways of building bulletproof blocks of time. Easy for me to say. You need to practice. You need to practice them. They're not just going to show up and work for you right away. You need to be consistent with them, either in the following through with them, with theming your time, or by setting them up on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis or whatever cadence you need when it comes to blocking time. But you need to give both of these tactics time to take hold, time to work. These are going to be new habits that you build, and all the things that you're going to learn at this summit, you're going to need to give time to take hold. They're going to have to be nurtured. They're going to have to be fostered. And the only way is through deliberate practice. Cal Newport talks about this in his book, Deep Work. You're going to need to do that. There's no magic pill. There's no secret formula to, you take a swig of this drink and boom, you're productive. That's not how it works. Productivity is a lifestyle. It's a way of operating. It's not a diet. It's not a one and done proposition. You wouldn't go to the gym and work out one day and then come out jacked or in perfect shape. You wouldn't. It takes practice. It takes doing it consistently. And that's what you need to do with this. And this is one of the ways that I can help you with this, because I work with hundreds of people every single year, either in group settings or one-on-one. And this is the first time I'm doing this particular challenge, and I wanted to announce it here as part of the Task Management and Time Blocking Summit. It's the Forge Your Future Challenge. It's a free 3-day challenge taking place from March 26th to March 28th, where I will be going over some of the stuff we talked about today, the nuances between time blocking and time theming. I'm going to be talking about the other elements of time theming, such as daily theming and monthly theming. I'm also going to talk about the idea of mode-based living. And journaling, which I mentioned earlier, that's a huge component of it as well. Over the 3 days, I'm going to be with you live for a period of time over those 3 days, working with you to help you forge the future that you want. It's time that you start doing this. You've taken a great first step with this summit and all of the other offers that are coming along with what Francis and his team have put together for this summit. And I wanted to present this Forge Your Future Challenge to you first before I've presented it to anybody else, even my own email list, even my own audience, because you're here to start forging your future the way that you want it. And so I encourage you to check out productivityist.com/forge your future and sign up for the free challenge. It takes place at the end of March, March 26th to 28th. And did I mention it's free? It doesn't cost you a thing. I will be there with you throughout the challenge. I'm really I'm excited for this. I'm really, I've set aside a period of time, a themed time, horizontally themed time to put this thing together for you. Not just the assembling of it, but actually when I'm there with you. So you're going to be practicing time theming if you show up live. So I encourage you to check it out. Again, it's the Forge Your Future Challenge. If you go to productivityist.com/forge your future from March 26th to March 28th, I will be there live with you, helping you forge your future so that you can move forward in the way that you want to go. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. Again, I encourage you to go back, review it. Again, there's a lot to unpack here. And if you have any questions, you just email me. Email me at askmike@productivityist.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, I promise. I answer all the emails that come to this address. This is the direct line to me, so any emails that come in that I see, and if you want to put in the subject line, bulletproof, or whatever you want to put in there that's related to this summit, I'll see it and I'll reply to you. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to watch this. I hope you enjoy the rest of what the summit has to offer, and I want to thank Francis for giving me this opportunity to share this with you. And again, I hope you go about taking the lessons you've learned, not just from this session, but from all the other sessions, so that you can move forward in a more productive fashion than ever before. So thanks again. This is Mike Vardy from Productivityist, reminding you to stop guessing and start going. I'll see you later.